Hi, I'm Amy Quinn, and you're welcome to the latest episode of the Pig Edge, Teagasc Pig podcast, where we are bringing you the latest news, information, and advice to keep Irish pig farmers up to date with the industry. Pig farmers can often spend a considerable amount of time grading and sorting pigs throughout the production stages, but in this episode we talk to Specialist Pig Advisor Michael McKeon to discuss why this well-known practice might in some cases be costing producers. Michael first coined the term Evenitis to best describe this practice at the 2015 Teagasc Pig Farmers Conference, and he's here to tell us that this issue hasn't gone away. I first asked Michael to tell us what exactly Evenitis is.
To the human eye, we like everything to be all the same size and to be like peas in a pod. And that's fine for peas, but for pigs that doesn't work as well, because if everything is to be the same size, it means you have to move pigs around, and that doesn't work very well for pig production.
What is the main problem with it?
Well, the main problem is the more you move pigs around, obviously the pigs in a pen have a pecking order. So once you take a pig out of a pen, or you introduce some pigs into a pen, they all have to rearrange the pecking order within the pen. So therefore they're fighting, there's more aggression, there's more stress. So even though the pigs might still be eating the feed, because of the stress and the aggression, they're not actually growing. So therefore it's going to affect your performance. And from a welfare point of view as well, then it's obviously there's more injuries and more lameness and things like that as well.
And so what stages does it normally occur at?
Probably the three main stages you'd see the holding of Evenitis is in the farrowing, at weaning, and maybe a transfer to finisher. So in the farrowing, I know, for example, when I go out onto a pig unit, there's one particular pig producer that every time we walk through his farrowing room, as he's walking through the farrowing room, he'll see one small piglet within a litter, and the piglet might be fine and healthy, but he will move it from that litter onto another litter, and that's a sign there. He's not moving it because the piglet has a problem. He's moving it simply because he thinks it's just smaller than the litter mates and therefore isn't going to do as well. And there's no real science behind that, and in fact the science would show the opposite, that he's far better off not moving them. And the other issue, I suppose, is that people think that I grade them because I want less weight variation at the finisher stage when they're going to the factory. But in fact, it doesn't improve your weight variation. It'll disimprove your weight variation, in that there's going to be more weight variation if you grade the pigs rather than less weight variation. So it's only making the problem worse.
If we look at the farrowing house, what should be the main practices here?
Yeah, well, if we look at a farrowing house, obviously within the first 24 hours, you are looking to leave all the piglets with their mother. And the reason for that is that they want to get the colostrum and as much colostrum as they can off the mother within the first 24 hours. And after that, there's no problem doing some cross fostering if you need to do some cross fostering. So for example, if you have a very large litter there and there's a very small litter, and you said, right, I need to move a few piglets there just to try and even up the litters from a numbers point of view, to make sure they all have a teat, that's not an issue. But that needs to be done after 24 hours. And once you have that done, then you shouldn't move any other pigs unless the pigs are sick or they're not suckling. So if you have a small piglet within a large litter, leave the small piglet there if the small piglet is a healthy piglet. Don't move him just because you think he is a smaller piglet and therefore doesn't look as well as the other piglets, because all the other piglets are big and you'd like all of the big piglets. And there's two reasons why actually moving the piglets is a bad idea. One, if you move one small piglet from one litter and you move that small piglet into another litter, you're going to upset the litter that piglet is after coming from, because they all have to regrade themselves, and therefore the litter that the piglet's going into then also have to regrade themselves as well, from a pecking order point of view. So really it means for every one piglet you're moving, you're upsetting probably anything from 24 to 26 to 28 piglets in the farrowing house. So if you move 3 or 4 piglets, it's a huge amount of disruption in the farrowing house. And the other problem as well is if you put all the small piglets all together onto the one sow or the one gilt, the amount they're not able to stimulate the sow to produce as much milk as where you have a piglets of small piglets and large piglets all together on the one litter. They're able to stimulate the sow much better than if there are a lot of small piglets in the one litter. So what I would say is move them after 24 hours. And then don't move them after that unless there is a pig at high risk. So it's not eating, or it's sick. And obviously then you have to move it straight away. But other than that, leave the piglets as they are.
So there is a place for it, but only within reason.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have to move it due to the pig going hungry or the pig is sick, then absolutely do it. But don't do it just because you think it's a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller than the litter mates.
Okay. When weaning the pigs, what's the best policy here then?
Yeah, so when weaning the pigs, there are some pig units, and they love to wean the pigs to all exactly the same size. So they'll take the biggest pigs, and they'll wean all of the biggest pigs into the one pen, and then they'll take so that could be the top 20%. They'll take the next 20% and they'll wean them. They'll take the next 20% of the same size and wean them into a separate pen. So like they may be splitting the pigs at weaning maybe into 6 or 7 different groups purely on the size of the piglets. The problem with that is, one, it's a huge amount of work having to do that every week, which would be fine if you thought that it was going to generate benefit for the pig unit or for the pigs, but it's not. And the other side of it is that really the piglets aren't going to go or grow any better by being weaned in the same weight, and in fact they're going to be worse, because if you have a piglet of 7 kilos who is weaned with another piglet of 7 kilos, they're going to fight a lot more. Whereas if you have a piglet of 7 kilos who's weaned with a piglet of 9 kilos, the 7 kilo piglet is going to look at the 9 kilo piglet and go, well, I'm not going to start fighting with them, and therefore the pen will settle down an awful lot more. Whereas when pigs are the same weight, they'll fight a lot more to try and establish a pecking order within the pen. So what I would suggest is, rather than grading all the pigs which are weaned every week, simply grade the very lightest, so the top 10%, the bottom 10% of the lightest pigs, and also the progeny of the gilt litters. And the reason I say the progeny of the gilt litters is that we have a lot of research here in Moore Park that has shown that the progeny of the gilt litters will actually have a lower average daily gain, and their immunity isn't as good, so therefore they're more at risk of disease. So therefore, if the progeny of the gilt litters and the lightest pigs can all be grouped together into one pen, they can get then some preferential treatment. So they might be fed a higher spec diet, they might be fed with maybe milk, or they might be fed some things like that will help them to try and improve the growth rates. And therefore the other 80% of pigs, just leave them as they are. So if there's big and small within the pen, that's fine, just leave them as they are. Because they've shown that if you don't grade at weaning, the ungraded pigs actually will have between 1 and 1.5 kilos of a gain by the time they come to the finishers, compared to the pigs that were weaned. So there's a good bit of information from Kansas State that they did some trial work there in about 15 years ago, and they looked at different size of pens, and they looked at the graded and the ungraded pigs, and they found, irrespective of the number of pigs per pen, the ungraded pigs actually did a lot better than the graded pigs. And again, that's down to there's less stress with the ungraded pigs. The other advantage is that if you grade 2 or 3 litters together, then there's less fighting as well. So if you can take an intact litter and another 2 of the intact litters, and you grade them all into the one pen, therefore the amount of aggression and the amount of fighting is an awful lot less, and they'll settle down faster and therefore performs a lot better.
So you're aiming to keep the litters intact as much as possible then?
As much as possible. Yep. So if you can do that, there's a lot of research to show that the performance of those pigs will be a lot better.
And then if you are going to the effort then of separating out the bottom 10% and the gilt progeny, you would want to be doing something different, like feeding a higher spec diet.
Yeah, absolutely. So you might try and get them, for the smaller pigs, you might put them onto a milk diet, maybe a milk supplement there in the first couple of days, or a warm gruel, or you might have them on a higher spec diet for longer, so that they'll try and their performance will try and catch up with the average of that week's pigs. So by the time they move into finishers, you might actually find that the weight variation between those and the average weight of the pigs is actually a lot smaller. Whereas and therefore there's a reason why you're separating out the smallest pigs at that stage. You're not just separating them because they look better. You're actually doing something with the smallest pigs.
The transfer to finisher stage then can be another potential area for regrading, can't it?
Yes. So transfer to finisher stage, 15 or 20 years ago, we would have had a lot of remixing at this stage. We don't have as much remixing now as we used to have, but it is still an issue for some units. So even if you're moving pigs from the weaner stage, and maybe you have 40 pigs in a pen in the weaner stage, and you're splitting up into 2 pens in the finisher stage of 2020, that is still the same as remixing pigs. And again, you'll have the higher levels of aggression and the increase in establishing the pecking order, and that's going to affect your performance. For example, if a unit that's doing it may have a feed conversion of 2.6, whereas a unit that's not doing it may have a feed conversion of 2.55. And the reason for the difference in the feed conversion is for the first 3 or 4 days when the pigs are fighting, they're still eating the feed, but they're not growing because of the stress, and that's going to affect their feed conversion then, and it's going to get worse on that. So that's where transfer to finisher stage, you don't want to be remixing your pigs, transferring from weaner to finisher. You want to try and keep them in the same pen groups as they are from weaner into finisher. Sometimes what people will say is that, is this going to affect the variation at sale? And it's not. If you're going to take the tops off it, and it's something that we can discuss.
So what do you suggest then to farmers who have weight variation in the pens that are approaching sale? What can they do?
So I would say, instead of regrading the pigs at transfer from weaner to finisher, as we said, is not a good thing to do. You're better off to go in 3 weeks before sale. Just do it once and do it right. So 3 weeks before sale, go in and take maybe the top 10% of the heaviest pigs within the pen and remove them for sale at that stage. So for example, if you have a pen of say 25 pigs, you might take 2 to 3 of the heaviest pigs within the pen 3 weeks before sale. And this has 2 effects. One, it means then when the rest of the pigs are going to sale 3 weeks later, you don't have any pigs that are exceeding the customer weight spec or the from the processor, the weight spec from the processor. So you're keeping them within the weight bands. The other thing it does is, by taking the heaviest pigs out of the pen and 2 to 3% the top 2 or 3 pigs out of the pen at this stage, it gives more space allowance and more feeder access then to the rest of the pigs which are in the pen. So you're trying to get a balance between making sure that your weight variation is minimized without upsetting the pen too much. The problem that some units do is that they go in 3 weeks before sale, they go in 2 weeks before sale, they go in 1 week before sale, and this is upsetting the pen too much. So you just want to do it once to try and minimize the upset to the pen. And if you do it 3 weeks before sale, you're giving the rest of the pen then the extra space when they most need it there, when they're the biggest. If you only do it 1 week before sale, it means they're not really going to get the benefit of the extra space and the feeder allowance. So you're better going in, just do it once about 3 weeks before sale. And that will minimize your weight variation then at sale.
Okay, so take the tops out once, and then in 3 weeks' time, let's say, sell the remainder of the pen.
That's it. Yeah, exactly.
Just to finish up, Michael, how would you summarize the main points when it comes to Evenitis then?
So Evenitis is, you need to decide, why are you grading pigs? Why do you want to Evenitis? Are you doing it because it makes the pigs look better, or are you actually doing it for a reason? So if you're removing pigs, what are you going to do with the pigs that you're removing? If you're removing, and you have to remove them for a reason. So what I would say is that only cross foster in the farm house at 24 hours, and don't move small pigs after that unless there is an issue with the pig that is not eating or that it's sick. Other than that, if there's a big pig and small pigs in the farmhouse, leave them as they are, because every time you move a pig, you're upsetting anything from 25 to 30 pigs. At weaning, I would suggest that you grade the lightest. So you're looking at the top, at the lightest 10 to 15% of the pigs and the progeny of the gilt litters. The reason you're grading these ones is you're going to do something different with these, in that you're going to try and feed them more of a high spec diet or a bespoke diet, or you're going to give them a little bit of extra care and attention. The other 80% of the pigs, then leave them as they are with the weight variation that they have. And if you're transferring to the finisher, don't regrade them when they're going to the finisher, again, because it'll upset them too much. But if you want to minimize your weight variation sale, do it 3 weeks before sale, as we mentioned before, by taking the tops off it, doing it once, and taking the top 10% of the heaviest pigs off once about 3 weeks before sale. And I think that will give you the best balance, that you're not just getting peas in a pod for the sake of it. You're minimizing your variation, and you're doing something with the very, very smallest pigs, but the rest of the pigs, you're leaving them as they are.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Some very practical steps there.
No problem. Thank you very much.
That's it for this episode of The Pig Edge, and many thanks to Michael for joining me on the show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more farming information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Amy Quinn, thanks for listening, and join me next time on The Pig Edge for more updates, news and advice.